I don't know if you've noticed it lately, but we live in a judgmental world. That may be the understatement of the morning. And we get taught from an early age to make judgments about things. The world makes lots of judgments about things, about ideas, and then, of course, and most unlike what God would want, make judgments about people. We're just good at that, putting things into right and wrong, good and bad. I mean, even Christmas, we introduce a wonderful saint like St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, and what do we immediately have him doing but making a list of things which are good and bad, and hopefully the good outweighs the bad, or you get a lump of coal for Christmas. Remember that? Did anybody ever actually get a lump of coal, though? Yeah, okay, all right, never, maybe I shouldn't have. But in any case, we live in a world that likes judgment, that likes kind of dual thinking. Jesus introduces us to an entirely different way, and on the baptism of Jesus, we have an opportunity to think about things in a different way. Even though John the Baptist this morning, he gets a little cranky from time to time. He's talking about the threshing floor and unquenchable fire and wheat and chaff and all of those sorts of things, which may lead us to believe that there's some kind of judgment that's going to be made, and there is, but it may not be exactly what we think. Enter the baptism of Jesus this morning. Typically, we hear that Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River by John the Baptist, although in the Gospel of Luke, it's not clear that that's what happens. In fact, they leave a few verses out this morning. You can see there's a gap in there, and that's because they just don't want to confuse people, but I always have to introduce the level of confusion into it. They leave the verses out. John's actually in prison by this point. I mean, he says his words there. He's a very popular guy, much more popular than Jesus at this time. He's Jesus' cousin, much more popular, many more followers. He's baptizing people in the river. I mean, people aren't really paying that much attention to Jesus. It's John. John is saying, but it's not me. It's him. It's this one. This one will come, and he will come with a winnowing fork in his hand. And in the gospel this morning, when Jesus is baptized, it is not by John's doing. It is an act of God. God comes forth and God does the action. God calls and claims the relationship with Jesus. You are my son. With you, I am well pleased. On this baptism this morning with Catherine Susan, God comes and tells us what we already know. She is a beloved child of God, and that absolutely nothing will break that bond. And what we have in common with Catherine Susan is that all of us are children of God by adoption. By adoption. Paul says we've received, and we are children of God because we have received the spirit of adoption, and God has claimed us as God's own. This baptism this morning isn't about coming into a church or washing something away that's there that shouldn't be or anything like that. It's about the claiming of a relationship that cannot be broken. Why then is John talking about wheat and chaff and a threshing floor and unquenchable fire? What is this all about? Well, imagine that the grain comes in, on the stalk, and they don't have fancy machinery there. There's a threshing floor, and so the whole plant is pressed down, and the grain comes to one piece, and the chaff, all of the extra things that you don't really want, come separately. In God's judgment, what is eternal, the grain, is what is kept in the chaff. All the things we don't need are burned away. It's not the people that are burned away. It's not the people that we've judged as bad, or that, and we don't usually need people to judge us. We usually do a pretty good job indicting ourselves for all of the things that we do wrong and all the ways that we come up short, but it's not people who are being burned. It's all of those things which no longer matter. All of those things about us we wish we could have changed, all of those things about us which we've done wrong, or all of those ways that we've erred, that gets burned away, and what is kept is the eternal. This is not about a separation of good and bad and that good people go one direction and bad people go another direction. It's that the wheat and the chaff grow together. If you've lived long enough, you know what I mean. I mean, some days you can be really good and other days, not so much. Sometimes in the same minute, that's possible. But the bond that we have with God is unbreakable. And what actually happens at the day of judgment is a cleansing. And all of the things which are not eternal about us, all those things which are not about love, which we would just as soon shed in our life if we could have, and all of those things that we did that we didn't even know about, all that gets burned away. And what is left with all of us finally is the love of God. That's the power of this gospel this morning. This one Jesus who comes with a winnowing fork in his hand is not to divide people. It's just to take all the things that don't matter anymore and all of those things which we couldn't help but do, or that we could help but do but did anyway, and burn them away. That's what happens. That's what happens at the judgment. That's why judgment is a powerful thing. If you grew up afraid of God or afraid of going to some place where God isn't, you don't have to be afraid of that. God takes that all away. And the way that we see that most happen, and we see that claimed in real life, is in these waters of baptism. In the fire about which Isaiah talks about, which does not consume, the fire that Moses saw in the bush that does not consume the bush, but illumines it. That is the fire about which we speak. The Holy Spirit that claims us and marks us as Christ's own. And by a spirit of adoption. A bond with God that cannot be broken. And we can count on someday all of those things being taken away. And what is left is the love of God and a relationship with God, a bond and a covenant that is never broken.